Imagine a society where reading is a forbidden crime, where your name is stripped away and replaced with a signifier of property.
Where even the clothes you wear dictate your entire existence.
And the question is, how quickly could that freedom just disappear?
That startling premise is really the foundation of Margaret Atwood's monumental late 20th century dystopia. This book isn't just fiction. It's a political warning, a landmark text of second-wave feminism that, well, it quickly garnered major accolades.
Like the Governor General's Award, right?
That and the Arthur C. Clarke Award. It established the book almost immediately as essential modern literature.
Now, before we really get into it, we're doing something a little different today. We want you to discover a new, in-depth approach to book coverage with this extended summary.
That's right. Unlike our previous reviews, which are typically a more focused analysis, this feature delivers a really comprehensive overview.
We're tracing the intellectual roots, the key arguments, and the real-world impact of this subject. If you appreciate this expanded format and find it helpful, please let us know. Your feedback will absolutely help shape future content.
And for you, the listener, just remember, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM, designed to give you deeper, more dynamic book summaries.
Our mission today is to deliver a full, in-depth summary of the narrative's intellectual roots and key progression. We're going to focus intensely on the chilling journey, but without revealing the final outcome.
And we're guided through this whole thing by the voice of Offred, our narrator.
She's a handmaid living under the Republic of Gilead, which is this theocratic, patriarchal government that violently replaced the former United States. The story itself is set in the new future New England region.
To truly grasp Offred's world, we have to start with the foundational structure. I mean, Gilead didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was engineered.
It was deliberate.
Completely. A fundamentalist group seized power, suspended the constitutional order, and then they created this rigid theocratic system. It's justified by a calculated mix of Old Testament language and just outright authoritarian politics.
So what was the public justification they used? Because to sell something so extreme to overthrow a democracy, you need a powerful, emotionally charged reason.
You do. And what's chilling is that their justification connects directly to a very real global anxiety.
Right.
Lowered fertility rates. We're talking about a world grappling with severe pollution, environmental damage, and Gilead's leaders essentially weaponize that ecological crisis.
So they frame it as a moral failing.
Exactly. They present the inability to reproduce as a divine punishment for the prior society's sins.
Right.
That makes the enforcement of absolute reproductive control seem not just necessary, but sanctified.
And once you establish that crisis, you need immediate visible control, which explains the caste-like system, right? The color-coded uniforms.
Precisely. It's a mechanism for immediate classification and surveillance. That visual stratification ensures everyone knows their place.
The handmaids, like Offred, are defined only by their reproductive role, so they're in those dramatic red dresses with the restrictive white wings.
The wives, married to the powerful commanders, wear blue. The Marthas, who do domestic work, are in a muted green.
And then there are the aunts, the enforcers of discipline and doctrine. They wear brown.
And they are perhaps the most sinister. They manage the internal control structure.
And this control extends far beyond just clothing. The entire physical environment is hostile. You see militarized checkpoints everywhere, goods are rationed, and there's this pervasive silent menace of...
Yes.
Exactly, the secret police. They are everywhere and nowhere at once.
This is where the world building is just. It's truly terrifying. We also hear about the colonies. These are horrifying, geographically separate work camps.
For who? Who gets sent there?
Anyone deemed non-compliant or unfit. Political dissenters, homosexuals, older women who no longer fit a prescribed role. The book also mentions the organized resettlement of people they label children of Ham.
Which suggests a massive state-sanctioned process of racial segregation underpinning the whole thing.
It does.
So if that's the horrific present, I mean, how did society even get there? The novel alternates between Offred's claustrophobic daily existence and her memories, her flashbacks.
Right, to her ordinary life before, with her husband Luke and their daughter. And those memories trace a terrifyingly gradual political shift. It wasn't an instant collapse.
It was that slippery slope of control.
That's it. And this is maybe the most intellectually demanding part of the book. Offred recalls the initial, the less violent steps of repression. Women were first prevented from working certain jobs, and then their private assets were targeted.
That economic restriction is so key. I remember the chilling moment she describes when women's bank accounts were suddenly frozen.
Yes. The simple act of losing access to your own money, the inability to control property or even hold a credit card. It meant that legal personhood was stripped away before the violent revolution even kicked off.
So the ultra-religious forces became more assertive, but the real damage was already done in the legislative silence beforehand.
Exactly. When the ability to earn, spend, or own is revoked, the foundation of personal freedom is gone. The violence only formalized the economic enslavement that had already happened.
But the real terror wasn't just the slow slide. It was the sudden violent rupture that followed it.
Yes, the coup, a militant group orchestrates this coordinated attack, assassinating the president and members of Congress,
Which leads to a declared state of emergency, an emergency that, of course, becomes permanent.
and becomes the Republic of Gilead. The immediate consequences for women were brutal. Dismissed from their jobs en masse, permanent restrictions preventing them from working, reading, controlling property, anything.
Those emergency orders just hardened into permanent biblical-sounding law almost overnight.
It sealed their fate.
And this is when Offred and Luke try to escape, right?
They make a desperate attempt to flee across the border to Canada, but the escape fails. That resulted in their capture and the immediate separation from her husband and child.
Leaving her with this permanent, agonizing uncertainty about what happened to them, it's a weight she carries through the whole narrative.
After her capture, Offred is sent for re-education at the Rachel and Leah Center, which they quickly nicknamed the Red Center.
Run by the aunts.
Run entirely by the aunts, women like Aunt Lydia. They are the architects of the Handmaid's complete psychological overhaul. They enforce rules, deliver these relentless indoctrination lectures, and cherry-pick biblical stories to justify everything.
The training is just systematic dehumanization. They're forced to watch propaganda, participate in these awful group accountability sessions,
Where they're pressured to publicly shame and blame each other for their past freedoms.
and witness terrifying punishments designed to reinforce absolute instant obedience.
But there is a glimmer of defiance in this place. It's Moira, Offred's college friend.
Right, she represents open, active rebellion.
She repeatedly attempts these daring escapes, and she offers Offred this crucial contrasting image of resistance, a fierce rejection of Gilead's control, right there within the walls of the Red Center.
So after her training, Offred is assigned to a high-ranking official, the commander, and this assignment immediately seals the loss of her identity.
Her new name, Offred. It literally means of Fred.
She is his property, a functional object in his household.
And that household is a microcosm of Gilead's hierarchy and its tension. We meet Serena Joy, the cold, resentful wife, who is bitter about her inability to have children.
And also about her own forced subservience. She helped build this system that then stripped her of her previous public influence. A paradox.
A huge paradox. We also meet Nick, the commander chauffeur, who has this quiet, almost unsettling demeanor. And then there's Offlin.
Her assigned shopping partner. Handmaids can't go out alone, so Offlin is essential for her limited daily movement.
And their interactions, which are formal at first, they quickly become a source of profound narrative tension.
You know, that level of detail is so important. And if you appreciate this kind of comprehensive analysis, remember you can find more in-depth content. Mindful Moments, our YouTube channel, offers AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques, all designed to inspire reflection and rational thought.
Once Offred is assigned, her daily routine becomes crushingly rigid. Her existence is defined by these prescribed walks, always 2 by 2 in the small, bare spaces of her room.
Which is under constant surveillance. The lack of privacy is absolute.
And the central, formalized ritual is what they call the ceremony.
This is the commander's attempt to impregnate her.
While Serena Joy is right there in the room, creating this atmosphere of intense psychological violence under the guise of religious justification.
It's the ultimate reduction of human interaction to a sterile, routine function of the state.
But this routine, it begins to crack.
Mm-hmm.
The commander starts to break protocol.
Summoning her to his private office.
And these aren't official visits for the ceremony. They're surprising. He asks her to play Scrabble. He gives her forbidden reading material. He just wants to talk.
Talk about the world before.
This rule-breaking isn't just a clandestine sortation. It's a profound insight into the inherent instability and hypocrisy of Gilead's totalitarianism. The commander, an architect of this moral structure, desires the very intellectual comforts of the past he helped destroy.
He risks everything for a forbidden book.
Or a quiet conversation. And then he takes that risk even further.
When he escorts her, disguised, to a secret club or brothel.
Which absolutely shatters Gilead's public morality. It exposes this thriving, illicit black market for entertainment and sex among the ruling elite. It proves that the moral rigidity enforced on everyone else is completely disregarded by those at the top.
And this is where she unexpectedly sees Moira again.
Yes, now resigned to a different kind of servitude.
So while the elite are indulging in this private hypocrisy, Gilead maintains control over the masses through these terrifying public spectacles.
The wall. Offred frequently sees executions displayed on the wall, marked with symbols indicating the alleged offense, political dissent being a so-called gender traitor.
And crucially, the system forces participation. There are the salvagings, these ritualized public executions, and then persecutions.
The truly awful term. It refers to compulsory communal violence where handmaids and others are compelled to literally beat a state enemy to death.
It shows how violence functions not just as punishment, but as this terrifying public spectacle. It's designed to release aggression and compel conformity.
Meanwhile, the domestic situation within the commander's household is escalating dramatically.
Because Offred has not conceived through the formal ceremony.
So the increasingly resentful wife, Serena Joy, secretly approaches Offred with a desperate, complex proposal. Sleep with Nick, the chauffeur.
In a clandestine arrangement to increase the chance of pregnancy.
And the leverage Serena uses is just heartbreakingly calculated. She promises small rewards, including crucial information about the fate of Offred's lost daughter, in exchange for compliance.
It shows how maternal hope can be leveraged even in the most repressive system imaginable.
And these mandated visits with Nick, they quickly develop their own momentum. They move beyond a mere transaction.
They become these repeated clandestine meetings that add immense emotional complexity and heightened risk to her story.
What's central here, though, is that the book leaves Nick's affiliations and long-term intentions profoundly ambiguous.
Is he a genuine romantic connection? Secret resistance agent? Or is he an eye sent to entrap her?
We and Offred never fully know.
That pervasive ambiguity is echoed in her relationship with the first Offglin, her shopping partner.
Right. Offglin discreetly tests Offred with coded questions and comments,
slowly revealing her involvement in the underground resistance network, Mayday. This relationship offered her first real glimpse of organized opposition, of hope.
But, as is so often the case in Gilead, that hope is tenuous.
Very. The connection ends abruptly and violently. Offglin's situation changes, and Offred learns that she took an extreme course of action, suicide, rather than risk capture and interrogation by the eyes. It just highlights the constant, severe consequences of discovery, the incredibly high stakes of even the smallest act of resistance.
Let's pull back for a moment and look at the narrative structure that allows Atwood to build this level of psychological pressure.
It's all written in the first person from Offred's perspective. It creates a non-linear but forward-moving timeline, right?
Exactly. It constantly alternates between her constrained immediate life and these vivid past tense flashbacks. The coup, the Red Center.
Atwood's style relies so heavily on that close interior monologue and the detailed descriptions of small routines.
And the narrative cleverly layers Offred's intimate, searching voice with the official, sanitized propaganda language of Gilead. It shows how deeply indoctrination tries to penetrate daily thought. It makes Offred constantly question her own memory and sanity.
So on a thematic level, what does this all mean for someone trying to understand the book? On the surface, it's clearly exploring authoritarian rule, state control over women's bodies.
The manipulation of religion as a tool of governance, and the complete loss of identity through surveillance. All of that.
But if we dive deeper,
the narrative really focuses on how everyday human needs, gossip, yearning for affection, the desire for intellectual stimulation, how they continue and persist even under a truly repressive regime.
It focuses so intensely on the psychology of survival versus the possibility of complicity.
It does. It forces you to confront the difficult question of what it means to retain your humanity when all external structures are designed to strip it away.
So to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Well, if the commander, one of the primary architects of this moral tyranny, risks death simply to play Scrabble and read forbidden literature, what does that secret hypocrisy tell us about the longevity or true beliefs of any totalitarian system built strictly on moral restrictions? That's something to mull over long after Offred's story ends.
If this in-depth format helped you gain new perspective, click the link on screen for the in-depth book critique. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally about the lessons of Gilead. See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.